Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about New Jersey cEDH presents the Sinkhole, which is super cool. This is the first, official tournament under the New Jersey cEDH lens for a lot of these folks. However, the main tournament organizers for this event have been running a number of different events through Jersey through next year. So it's a really cool, awesome opportunity to talk about not only this really cool tournament group, but the top 16 decks from today. A little bit of spoilers, I do end up winning this tournament today. And I'm super happy with it, especially given the fact that on that day, I was on less than 2 hours of sleep. So for anybody who watched my last video, what you may have noticed was that I said I was doing a tournament in Massachusetts on that Saturday, meaning I had to drive all the way back home to Pennsylvania, take care of my pets, and get about 90 minutes of sleep before I woke up, and then drove 2 hours into New Jersey to participate in this tournament. So obviously it was a bit of a crazy 48 hours for me in general, driving up to Massachusetts from New Jersey one day, driving back home to Philadelphia, waking up, driving back to New Jersey, and then driving back home, in which my car also broke down at a gas station at 2 a.m. on the way home. So that was a whole thing too. Luckily here, safe and sound, recording this video for you all. So also before we do that really quick, you're here on YouTube. If you hit like and subscribe, it helps out the channel a whole ton. Also, if you're feeling we're super interested in supporting the channel, check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. Thank you. So first we have Kingpin 6162 here with Sunday Morning, a very classic Kinnan list here in this cEDH deck list. Also very cool that Kingpin's sibling was also in this top 16 as well, which I think is a fun little story to shout out. Also, I know I sort of said in the beginning, but major shout out to the New Jersey cEDH crew. They are consistently hustling. They run really awesome events, and honestly, one of the reasons I was able to wake up and get such little amounts of sleep was because I was motivated to the fact that this group makes it feel like such a safe, healthy community, and I really enjoy it. And so I was like, yeah, I'm kind of willing to go and bend over backwards for this group that really puts their best foot forward for our community. But anyways, back to the deck list. Sorry. We were talking about Kinnan Bonder Prodigy here today. A little bit of spice here. We don't often see Walking Ballista in the 99 of every Kinnan list. However, it is definitely a piece known to show up from time to time when folks are looking for basically a secondary win outlet. And I think it, depending on the pilot, will depend on how often they'll go for pieces like this. It's just nice sometimes to, especially if you're playing a more aggressive version of Kinnan, which I don't know that this version explicitly screams to me hyper aggressive, right? And if anything, it actually is more indicative of older Thrasios lists, or older Kinnan lists, much more in the big flips or medium flips style of game plan, and less of the modern Kinnan deck, which you tend to see a lot more things like copy enchantment, steal enchantment, things like that, very much focused on hyper aggressive card draw engines and a lot of free counter magic. Sylvan Caryatid here, I haven't looked at the enchantments yet in this deck, but I'm assuming we're going to see a Freed from the Real, because traditionally Caryatid is a really good Freed from the Real outlet with Kinnan, and traditionally what you often see in these situations. You have Glenn Wellinger here for your classic counter spells, a lot more of the big flips, as I mentioned, than some of the more modern versions of the deck sometimes feature, right? So we're seeing a popularization of one style, but we have here a top 16 with a more classic Kinnan style for sure. Got Nature's Rhythm showing off here, just being one of the best tutors Kinnan's ever had access to. A lot of solid removal or solid interaction, I guess, not explicitly removal, but yeah, solid interaction here from the deck list. And as I mentioned, Freed from the Real, Pemin's Aura here as these sort of surprise infinite mana outlets. For those who don't know, you can enchant them onto one of Kinnan's many creatures that can tap for at least the color blue. And then with Kinnan, you're doubling the mana, and therefore you get the ability to use the untap function on those cards to go infinite. So it works with Bloom Tender, it works with the Sylvan Caryatid, and it works with Birds of Paradise, as well as any of your creatures that have an Enduring Vitality out, right? So even if it's just your commander Enduring Vitality, all of a sudden your commander taps for 2 blue, and therefore tap on tap, tap on tap, tap on tap, you're able to go infinite, make infinite blue and infinite green mana, and then obviously cycle through your deck. For those who are familiar with the normal Kinnin combos, right? Traditionally, you go infinite with Basalt Monolith. You're able to tap for 4 mana and untap it for 3, and therefore generate infinite colorless mana that way. There's also a number of other different combos, including being able to bounce through things with Hullbreaker Horror or Tidespout Tyrant. If you have mana rocks that make more mana than they cost, you're able to bounce those infinitely and generate infinite mana that way. Nice, clean, and easy. Like, congrats to our pilot Kingpin for making the top 16 of this tournament. We got Pow 2 here with Yuriko Tempo. We got another Yuriko deck. I think I mentioned in yesterday's video, or I guess not technically yesterday's, but if I was in the day of the tournament, it was referring to the tournament that was the day before. I'm making this too complicated. In the last video here on the channel, I mentioned that Yuriko made top 16 in there as well. So maybe we got a bit of a Yuriko revolution going on here. Pow is here with a Yuriko Tempo list and doing some pretty cool stuff. Obviously got the new cool Yuriko art featured here from Final Fantasy. We got the classic, I guess it's not even classic, it just came out in Duskmore, and oh my god, so many sets come out in this format. But Kaito, one of the biggest upgrades Yuriko's ever gotten, obviously featured in the deck here. Bunch of dorky little flyers. You're trying to get one of these evasive creatures in, you're trying to swing in, have your creatures be unblocked, and ninjutsu in your ninjas, flipping over a ton of damage on your opponents, things like, Windcaller, Shadow Mortality, Temporal Trespass, Seagate, all those things, just dealing damage on damage on damage on damage to your opponents, as well as, being able to break sort of a little bit of parity on these free interaction spells, because you don't really care that you have a bunch of free interaction. You're stocking up your hand a ton with Yuriko, and you're able to interact with the table in ways in which a lot of other decks can't really afford that much free interaction. So it's kind of cool to see that there. Plus, Blood Chief Ascension's a cool win con in the deck, and obviously the classic Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation lines and Thassa's Oracle Tainted Pact are still in the deck and present as well. Cool. Congrats to our pilot for top 16. We have Twang here with Yum 2 Jers. This is Twang's Tymna and Thrasios list that he's been playing for basically since the format rotated over. Although, we were sort of talking at the end of the tournament. I think he's leaning more towards playing something else moving forward because of how he's been feeling about the Thrasios Tymna list. But very classic Tymna Thras here with a bit of Twang's own spice to it. You have your silence effects. You've got your Hazel Brewmaster combo with Devoted Druid as well. I don't know if there's a second Devoted Druid. Yeah, so they have Swift Reconfiguration. Basically, either one of those will make a non-creature copy of Devoted Druid or just turn Devoted Druid into a vehicle, able to generate infinite green mana through those means as well. A little bit light on the fast mana, but in favor of like Mana Dorks and things like that. You see Training Grounds and Biomancer's Familiar in the deck because it's is able to break parity and draw a lot of cards with Thrasios if things are getting super, super grindy. I believe the last time I covered Twang's list, they were on a Boro Breeze Caller, but we don't see it here today. A lot of free interaction has kind of been his TNT special as of this format, right? Things like Snuff Out, Commandeer, Misdirection, Mindbreak Trap, Deadly Frolic, Fierce Guardianship, Player Denial, Force of Negation, Force of Will. We played a round during Swiss, and he actually whipped out that Trick Bind to stop a silenced ability from a Ranger Captain from killing us. So that part was pretty sick and definitely cool to see the spicy Trick Bind tech whipped out of there. But yeah, Jorman's definitely a solid player in cEDH and definitely someone to look out for sure. Yeah, good job making top 16, man. So this list wasn't available, so I just made a copy of it. But this is Patrick McGuire's 13th place Kefka list. Kefka, obviously, a deck I'm believing in pretty hard, as I was just able to get second place with the list literally the day before this tournament. And so cool to see Kefka in here. And also we played in the top 16, which was pretty sweet. You've got a lot of cool advantage engines here on things like Deadpool, going infinite with Hullbreaker Horror. You got Vivi in the 99, which actually did come out during our top 16 match, but I was at like 6 life, so I was like, I gotta Pyroblast that thing, which actually almost did end up breaking bad, because then another deck that you're gonna see later was about to play their commander, and boy, did that almost go very, very poorly for us. We also have Tiny Bones here. I think this has been a card a lot of people are really excited about to test in Kefka, because you're basically using the fact that Kefka makes your opponents discard some cards to gain a bunch of advantage for doing so. Displacement Wave, gotta shout it out. So cool to see it in another list. Double board wipe in this Kefka list, which you gotta respect. I think literally I was working with a client earlier today who was like, I feel like people just aren't respecting board wipes enough, and it's pretty sweet to see too here, able to disrupt your opponent's board states pretty effectively if things get out of hand, which they tend to do in cEDH. You have Mnemonic Betrayals when your main win cons, this deck being, actually you have Retraction Helix with Valley Floodcaller too. So a lot of ways to go infinite in this deck. And it's interesting too with Kefka because like it's it's a bit of a crunchy infinite because Valley Floodcaller only untaps when you cast non-creature spells, which means when you are bouncing your Kefka as your infinite outlet a lot of the times, and of course, like if you find like a VV or a Hullbreaker or an Orcish not Bowmasters, but like a One Ring, makes this whole situation a little bit easier. But because you're playing Kefka and it's ETBing and drawing cards and things like that, you kind of have to hit a non-creature spell every time you go through if you want to untap Floodcaller and then bounce it back to your hand, right? And like statistically speaking, you're probably going to win in those situations, but it is interesting to note that like you make infinite mana and there are times in which you can make infinite and then whiff in that situation. Unlike with like the Hullbreaker combo, you just need to be able to cast spells, not cast specifically non-creature spells. Now, it is worth noting that, 17 creatures and 27 lands. So 44, meaning that 55 or 55, pardon me, of the non-land cards in the deck, so 55 of the cards in the deck, pardon me, are specifically non-creature spells, right? So it is a high number, but then if you also factor in the fact that you have to include counter spells in there to untap the flood, like there's a whole litany of like messiness that can go into for going infinite. And it can get rather complicated fast. Also, love the Displacer Kitten combo with the deck and love seeing Deadpool in the 99 and more decks. I think it is a card that people are just playing more and more because they're realizing this card just kind of honks every time it comes down. It steals something super impactful and then just completely warps the game. This list also running a few more value pieces with the commander, things like Essence Flux to flicker Kefka, get another ETB, et cetera, et cetera. So definitely a heavier synergy version of this deck list. And then obviously being on Underworld Breach lines, and as well as all the infinites that we talked about earlier, and the Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation stuff that we were talking about before. Congrats on your top 16. For those who've been watching the channel a long time, they know I love heavy play. And it's so funny, I get actually a lot of questions about heavy play products when I'm out and about at events because this is legitimately the products I use to protect my deck boxes. I use their playmats, I use their dice trays, I use their magnetic system, literally during the course of almost every tournament, unless I'm doing something very particular with, for example, when I played Loot and put it in the Loot deck box. But heavy play products are absolutely such high quality products, and I use it every tournament, not because I have to as part of my contract, but just because I genuinely love this product. And it's super easy for me to talk about all the reasons I love heavy play because it's good and because they're all great. They've also have a new batch of their sleeves out right now, which have a bunch of new vibrant colors. And I know historically there were some issues with some of the sleeves splitting. I've even talked to some of the heavy play reps. They mentioned that if anything happens with sleeves, you can also just send them into heavy play and get them fixed. But also, I've been messing around with the new sleeves, and I've always loved the shuffle feel of the heavy play sleeves, but I was worried about the splitting issue. And yet, I just played an entire tournament a couple days ago on the new heavy play sleeves. They, one, the shuffle feel still feels amazing. Two, the new color line is beautifully colored. And three, nothing broke. It all was perfectly fine at the end of the tournament. Every sleeve looked like it was brand new. So hoping that the new versions of the sleeves are nice, clean, and powerful, right? Been super happy using all the heavy play products. And if you use code Comedian, if you go to their website and order some of their product, you can get 10% off your order, which I highly recommend. Heavy Play makes some insanely high quality product, and they are the #1 brand for keeping your cards safe. So if you're interested, check out heavyplay.com/comedian to get 10% off your order. We have Jackpot here by Fervent Alchemist. This is Kai's Stella Lee list. Kai has been playing this list for quite some time and has another top cut here with this Stella Lee list. Definitely a passion deck, I feel like, for Kai at this point. Playing some really cool stuff. You got to respect the Is It Guild Mage, right? A card that kind of, in very weird niche circumstances, allows you to go infinite, which is pretty sweet because you can copy a spell like Dramatic Reversal, as long as you can make mana enough to pay for the Is It Guild Mage activation. Goes infinite there. You've got cool stuff with Ral Monsoon Mage in the 99 of the deck, which seems to be kind of a fun little Is It thing that's been happening, is like how many decks can stick Ral in the 99 of the deck and can afford to do so. For those who haven't seen a lot of Stella, we did a video way back in the day here on the channel, but basically Stella Lee is the Rotary Cannon, the 3-card Monty, right? It is this deck that cares about getting to that last tap to activate ability on Stella Lee, copying an instant or sorcery, and then you can choose new checker of the copies, and only activate you cast cast 3 or more spells this turn. So the idea is, traditionally speaking, you want to copy one of these instants that allow you to untap your creature and draw a card, right? There's also a sorcery in the deck, Twisted Fealty, that allows you to untap a creature and put a wicked roll on it, which actually will drain your opponents of all their life. There's a lot of different untap and do a thing abilities in this deck, and Kai's playing a whole ton of them, plus a bunch of other different combos, usually outlet with something like an Underworld Breach. But the more I see like Stella Lee pilots who really cook on this deck, there's a lot of really cool stuff. For example, like you can make infinite copies of Dramatic Reversal, and it's like, yes, that doesn't draw through your deck, but if you have something like a One Ring, it does win the game, right? Or Sensei's Divining Top allows you to draw through the majority of your deck, right? So there's like layering of synergy on synergy on synergy with a deck like this, and it's super cool to see Stella successful. It's a very interesting and very cool deck list that I think, because it can be really commander reliant, sometimes gets a little shoved out of the format, unfortunately. But Stella is a very sweet card, and I'm very excited to see it here in the top cut. Congrats, Kai. We have the big dog 44 here with I thought monsoon season was over. Speaking of Ral Monsoon Mage, why don't we just feature one here on the channel? Which is funny because like I feel like we talk about Ral a decent amount, but don't often actually see it in the specific breakdowns we've done a whole ton. But here we have Jake's Ral list, which is super solid. It is trying to win the game. I love to always check and see how many lands Ral is running. Okay, this is a 22, one of the more modest amount of lands. I think the lowest I've ever seen in Ral is like 17, which is so crazy to me. But this is like good old fashioned Izzet Storm. For those who haven't experienced this deck before, Ral reduces the cost of your instants and sorceries, and then if you cast enough instants and sorceries, he flips over, gets up to 8 loyalty, and then basically has a Mind's Desire where you exile the top 8 cards and you can cast instants and sorceries for free. So this is like the epitome of like Storm old school style. You're casting a bunch of spells in your turn, you're flipping your commander, you're free casting a bunch more spells, and you are just trying to cast so many spells your opponents die, right? Like it is really that straightforward and cool. And the list is super sick to see. I know it's a deck that folks have wanted me to like sleeve up and play in a tournament sometime soon. I'm definitely interested in doing so. It's been one of those things where like actually the last time I went out to Minnesota, I was really considering playing Ral, but I was like, I don't know, I'm a little worried it'll be fragile into that meta. And then it ended up being the case that probably would have been a great choice to go out there with. So definitely want to play Ral soon. I played it at the Redemption event, but obviously was playing a list that I had never looked at before. I think I talked about it when I covered the Utah event. So a little bit of a list I'm very interested in trying. Anyways, you're on Mystic, Ristic, all that stuff. It's an Underworld Breach deck, and you're traditionally winning through a number of different ways. One of the newer versions of the decks, they're playing Rad Storm to basically be able to increase the loyalty of your Planeswalker over and over again. And then sometimes they're playing some sort of so like Prologue to Phyresis is actually one of their main win cons. So it's a cantrip that says each opponent gets a poison and you draw a card, right? So if you give everybody 1 poison, you get your Storm up to a point in which it would proliferate 9 times. You cast your Rad Storm and it goes poison all the way up to 10. And it's a hard win con in the deck. There's a number of other win cons in the deck. You're able to make infinite mana with Reiterate and Seething Song, or Reiterate with Jessica's Will, and then turn that into infinite lightning bolts. So like there are other win cons in the deck, but I know the Rad Storm, Proliferate, Poison stuff has been starting to pick up a lot of popularity. Funny enough, when I was mentioned, I was in Massachusetts the day beforehand. Blakey, who's the person who's been doing pretty well with the list as of late, was having a whole conversation with me about how the Rad Storm dynamic has been picking up steam in the Ral community. So it's cool to see it here in a list actually put into action. So very cool stuff, and congrats to Big Dog for the top 16 cut. We have Mox Flip here with It's All Jover. This is a Joyra Weatherlight captain. So for those who don't know Mox Flip or Tim, just sort of a Joyra lifer. Loves this deck, has it. I mean, if you've ever gotten a chance to play with him, and it's a gorgeous deck. Like most of it's in like Japanese foils. It is clearly a passion project, a project of love. And it's so cool to see this deck pop off. What does it do? Uses Joyra's ability. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you draw a card, right? So finding the right windows to basically go like, okay, I have my commander, I have stuff I want to cast, let's go. And then you play a historic spell and then you draw a card. And then you play a historic spell and then you draw a card. Then you play a historic spell and then you'll never guess you draw a card. And then you find effects like Paradoxical Outcome to return any number of non-land cards and draw that many cards, or Filter Out, which returns all non-creature non-lands to the hand, right? So what's really interesting about this archetype is like part of it is like, oh, well, you've just feed Rhystic Studies like crazy, right? But you're also playing a bunch of these other cards that say like bounce all of the things that are kind of like a Rhystic Study, right? Like Displacement Wave or Filter Out or stuff like that, right? So it has this weird kind of funky balance to it where it's like you've got to play your commander and then have it in a time in which you can still interact with the table if you need to, or interact with protecting your stuff. But also you can't overcommit to the point where you go too crazy and then like get fully blown out by a Rhystic or Mystic player, but you do have answers. So Joyra is a really fascinating deck because of that balance and that dynamic. But as I said, Mox Flip really, really makes this deck look good and plays it quite a lot. So it's definitely a passion project. Breach being one of the main win conditions after you get your Storm high enough. You can also do Words of Wind stuff, which basically says next time you would draw, you can pay one and each player bounces a permanent they control, right? So with Joyra, because each artifact is triggering a draw, you can use a Mox Amber, Mox Opal, etc., tap that for a mana, cast it again, bounce it with Joyra, and then start doing that loop over and over again. Your opponents have all of their permanents bounced, and at that point it's pretty easy to just rift the board over and over and over again and kill them through a number of different means. And I don't remember, are they on Reservoir? No, they're not on Reservoir. I don't remember, apart from Brain Freeze stuff, if there's another win condition for the deck. I might be missing it, but I'm curious to see, Mox Flip, if you're in the comments down below. I'd love to know if there's any other non-mill related win conditions, because I just see Codex Shredder, which would mill your opponents, and I just see Brain Freeze, which would mill your opponents. So curious to see if there's anything else in the deck that actually just like gets them dead, that isn't mill related. So interested in that for sure. Cool. Sick list. I always love seeing it. And congrats to our pilot for the top 16. Oh, is there something that, I don't know, does damage to your opponents? Yikes. For those of you who have already commented down below, I apologize. We have Big Bear 360 RS, who you may recognize from last week's video, or the last video I uploaded, because they were also in the top 16 of that tournament with this exact Italy list. So we won't go too hyper into detail, but they also did the back-to-back with me, but definitely did a little bit less driving. Super cool to see other folks coming out to support multiple tournaments in the CEDH community. But Big Bear, as I mentioned, an Italy pilot who shows up and puts dinos on the stack and does it well. Really cool to see some of the stuff here. Obviously, there was a few hours between these tournaments, so I don't think any cards were changed between them. We can check with the history log here on Moxfield, but okay, a day ago, Lifestream's Blessing, the one I highlighted yesterday, actually went out and Fellwar Stone went in, but that was after both tournaments. So it seems like the exact same list was played at both tournaments. So cool stuff here by Big Bear. Really quick shout out, Italy. You want to cast Italy a whole bunch of times. It can win through dual cast or twin flame lines or molten duplication, any number of those types of effects. You also, once again, the main win con is really just casting Italy a whole bunch, but then you can also go infinite with Squee and Food Chain and then cast Italy a whole bunch and then cast everybody's decks. And it's pretty easy to win with everyone's decks accessible to you for free. We have King Cherubics here with cEDH Francisco Loves Omega. We have Titus and Francisco here with this super interesting list. Actually got a chance to play against them in the Swiss, and they put in some pretty interesting work here with this list. And so for those who've been familiar with the Turbo Cradle archetype that's been picking up lately, this is a Thoracio Francisco list that definitely fits into that archetype, right? You see all of the hallmarks. You have your Biomancers, your Cloud of Fairies, your Aboro Breeze Caller. For those who aren't familiar with the main combo in the deck, you want to get Aboro Breeze Caller plus a Gaia's Cradle, which obviously very, very good and very broken magic card, and the Talon Gates of Madara. And as long as you have 6 or more creatures, you're able to bounce the Talon Gates back to your hand, use the Talon Gates activated ability to put it back on the battlefield, and then tap your Cradle because you've untapped it with your Boro Breeze Caller, and you're able to generate infinite mana without putting any spells on the stack after Boro resolves, which is obviously extremely powerful. And with Cradle being a main focus of the deck, a lot of this deck is put a lot of bodies on the field, right? Like it is not playing like the Chatterstorm stuff that's played in this archetype sometimes, but on things like Springheart and Tuco, Orcish Bowmasters, which is 2 bodies for 1, right? So maybe not as much of the go wide as some other versions of this deck have, but definitely still a lot of creatures on the battlefield and a lot of bodies that allow you to sort of go wide, tap Cradle for a bunch of mana, and then win that way. And then this deck also, because it's in black, has the backup win con of Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle Tainted Pact, which is just a nice little backup plan to have access to if you're, for example, this archetype can be so board state dependent, right? And it can get really blown out that way. So it's nice to have a good backup plan that is completely agnostic of the Cradle plan. Also, Combat Research they played in our Swiss round, which was so cool because it turned Francisco into attacker that was able to draw a card and explore every time it connected in combat. So that was a really fun little synergy we got to see during that match. But congrats to our pilot for taking a spicier version of the Cradle archetype to this top 16. We have Sinru here with Coin Flip Typal. This was one of the players we got to play in the top 16, and I mentioned being a little overeager with the Pyroblaster in the top 16 because Edgar came down and was about to draw literally like 10 cards during our semi-match. But this deck was super awesome to see. I got a major shout out to Sinru here, who is someone who shows up with super spicy decks in literally every tournament I've ever played them, and they do well with them too, right? Like it's not just showing up with a spicy deck and bubble it out, but like showing up with a spicy deck and also putting in the work. And I'm so glad because I know when I did the set review for this set, I missed this card, but I've been brewing this card on the side too. So I'm really cool to see it. I'm really like geeked to see it here in this top 16. So Edgar King of Figaro, you can straight up ignore the coin flip a part of this, which is, I believe, the bit of the name calling it a coin flip deck. But when this creature enters, you draw a card for each artifact you control. And I think the coin flip part sort of drowns that out for a lot of people, but it really is just ETB, draw a card for every artifact you control. And this deck is playing a lot of artifacts. Love seeing things like Roaming Throne, Geode Golem, crazy stuff like that. You've got both the Hullbreaker and the Tide Spout, so you can go infinite and play your commander over and over again, draw chunks of cards, and probably be able to win the game that way, hopefully. Jace, the Wielder of Mysteries, is definitely a very solid option for just, you draw more than your library, and then you go, cool, Jace, win the game, right? Makes sense there. You have Dreamstalker to pick up your commander, and not including the creature artifact. Let's see, there are 32 artifacts in the deck. And what's really cool about the way that Sinru piloted this deck was the fact that he didn't overcommit in a lot of situations and actually was doing a lot of really crazy work with this deck. Was able to layer stacks pieces on stacks pieces, disrupt just enough, use counter spells when it was appropriate to do so, and then was able to really, really press a lot of advantage during the course of that game. And they were in a dominant position for a really, really long time during that match. Playing these stacks pieces and not overcommitting to tapping out for the commander super early so that it would get blown out in that situation was a really, really solid way of playing the deck list, and it really paid off during the course of the game. And obviously, they were successful with that play pattern multiple times throughout the day. It's on Icecrown Scepter dramatic reversal stuff, which a lot of these decks, yes, Edward is like not a or Edgar is not a payoff for infinite mana, hypothetically, right? But with just infinite mana. But at the same time, if you're drawing the majority of your deck, you're probably able to find an outlet for infinite mana somewhere, right? Plus, you have Retraction Helix Valley Floodcaller stuff to be able to go infinite with that, like we described earlier in the video. So a lot of cool stuff. And then, oh my gosh, this commander with Displacer Kitten is like, so vomit good. It's insane. Really cool, spicy stuff here for this deck list. And this is the kind of stuff that I love seeing in cEDH. This makes me geek out 100% of the time. Congrats to our pilot for your top 16. We have Golden Kingpin here with Streets Ungiven. This is a blue farm list, but doing some pretty cool stuff here. Blue farm, also known as Timna Crom, is a mid-range ad nauseum / Oracle list. It is one of the most consistent decks in the format, but this one's playing some pretty spicy stuff that I love to see. You got Stitcher Supplier here as a, actually, for those who aren't familiar with it, Stitcher Supplier plus Culling the Weak is actually an Underworld Breach line because you're able to make more black mana from casting Culling and Stitchers, and then mill 6 cards each time you go through the loop. So you're not netting any cards in the graveyard. You're filtering through cards in your graveyard, but you're actually able to make 2 blacks. That's pretty sweet. You got Angel's Grace here to stop the other Thoracle wins, other infinite damage types of win conditions. Cool to see like sort of a Legends sub-theme in the deck where you got Basim Ibn Ishaq, you have Garland, right? Like a lot of really cool cards that allow you to get a little bit of advantage on your spell casts. This is an Oracle Console Tanipac deck for sure, and obviously an Underworld Breach deck as well. But being on Necro, being on no ad naus. Okay, so on Necropotence without ad nauseum. So that's kind of cool. You're taking the Intuition Gifts Ungiven package, prioritizing that instead of the ad nauseum package in this deck, which makes sense given the fact that like you have a bit more of like a medium-sized curve with some of these creatures, right? Because the average mana value, I think, of this deck list is like 1.38. So if it went to ad naus, it would be a little rough on the nauses, whereas like playing this sort of mid-range version works pretty well. It was really cool to see Golden Kingpin up here in these top cuts, someone I've played with a lot from New York and just a solid player. So it was really cool to see them making this really deep performance in this top 16. Congrats. There's another player whose list did not link through, but we have another blue farm list here. So we're going to do a little comparison. And a lot of the cards you probably saw me highlight as spicy from Kingpin's list are probably going to be showing up as not shared in these lists if I was a gambling man. Although, so Basim, Garland, some more of the red creatures in the deck. Oh, I didn't even mention Verity Circle. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. So really good against the green decks in the format, right? All the mana dorks, all the activated abilities on tap creatures, that they go kind of crazy into a Verity Circle. But we see a couple interactive pieces, a clone, the Angel's Grace that I mentioned, right? For more traditional means, which makes a lot of sense, where you have the ad nauseum, you have Gamble, Ragavan, all that kind of stuff here. No Mox Level on the other list. Didn't catch that either. So it's pretty interesting. And then Amphibian Downpour, pretty good control piece here for our 5th place Blue Farm player. So congrats to both pilots for making top 16, but congrats to Anton for putting up that top cut. Hey everybody, check out Toamagic.com. I can't say enough amazing things about Toamagic.com. It is a great place where they have an insane collection. If you want any cards from Magic's history, check out Toamagic.com. The odds are they have it. They even have a lot of premium versions of a lot of amazing products. They have insanely fast shipping and multiple shipping options available, as well as the ability to pick up products at site. Check out Toamagic.com. Y'all have been amazing about using their stuff already. And you can get some great deals on some insane cards. Speaking of Malcolm, aka Vistroken, this is his Sisay Legends deck, and Deus Ex Mortis Treasures Space Storm. We actually played the day beforehand at the King's Court tournament in Massachusetts as well, and Malcolm was doing some really cool stuff with this Sisay list, and I'm very, very excited to talk about it. This list has such cool innovation happening for Sisay because it has this like cool new combat focus, with especially featuring Knuckles the Echidna from Sonic, which is super cool because it just generates 2 treasures at minimum by itself, adds another color to Sisay, does some really sweet stuff there. Malcolm was also on Kumbal, which is a really cool card that we were talking about it afterwards, and he said it's been overperforming for him a lot. Facebreaker is also there for that combat focused plan, and then the really spicy one, as Malcolm described it, the big spicy one in the deck was the Balin Haymaker, able to take advantage of some of the treasure synergies and things like that were being created in this deck, because you have literally Kellogg there for treasures, you have Facebreaker there for treasures, you have Knuckles there for treasures. Speaking of combat, you have Druid's Repository, which is like an old Najeela win con that's featured in this deck, which is so cool. So I love seeing it here in this deck. And as I said, we played the day beforehand, and Malcolm was cooking with this deck. I mean, obviously also enough to make top 4. So clearly doing some pretty sweet stuff. Malcolm's also like one of the main people for the Hidden Footblade tech. It's a thing that allows you to get red on your things that tap for mana with Sisay. It also gives them haste, and it has flash. So it's like a super exciting surprise factor there. Malcolm's also infamous or famous for playing Dovin's Veto and Sisay. It's like his iconic card in the set, in the deck list. For those who aren't too familiar with Sisay, as it's our first one we're covering here today, this Sisay was trying to also ignore the classic Oath of Teferi, Nicol Bolas Aminatu lines and win with Emil combos for the most part. Teferi, who slows the sunset, being a main win con there as well, much like the one we covered when I won the Pink Pony Club. This list is on Bloom Tender, Fabro, and Silvala, which is definitely the difference between that and the list we talked about beforehand. Anyways, you want to get one of these tappers to make 5 mana. You start to go up through a chain until you get your Derevi, and then you're able to flicker Derevi with a meal and generate infinite mana through those means, and then activate Sisay an infinite amount of times. Plus, this version, spicily enough, is featuring the Auriok Salvager's Lion's Eye Diamond Bomberman combo, which is super, super cool to see, and very quick way to make infinite mana, even if you don't have a hand anymore. It's cool because Sisay, as we've talked about before on the channel, lacks like a speed plan. So instead of doing the Oracle Consult thing that I was featuring in the Pink Pony version of the deck list, Malcolm said, we're just going to go for some Bomberman tech and just make some infinite mana really quickly when my opponents aren't ready for it, which is obviously a very explosive way to be able to win the game with this deck. So very cool stuff here from Malcolm. Congrats on your top 4. You have the real Chris Mack here with Final Fantasy 14 Lands Natter. Not all those who wander are lost. Now, I do think that there were some deck adjustments that have been made since the time of the tournament. There's definitely a few movements from the deck list, but I believe when I'm in the Wandering Minstrel Discord, and a lot of the conversation seemed to be from Chris that Chris was moving towards some of the more common things that are being played in the other minstrel decks, while his version that he brought to the tournament was a little bit more focused on like surveil lands and like stuff like that, and just like putting a bunch of stuff in the graveyard for the Underworld Breach. So you may see some more like established minstrel combos that were in this list compared to the list from the event itself, but the idea is still relatively the same, right? So you're trying to do Wandering Minstrel stuff. As I mentioned in last week's video, Wandering Minstrel is like the new cool 5-color deck on the scene. This is a deck trying to basically leverage the fact that you have an Amulet of Vigor-esque effect in the command zone. And what you're trying to do is play a bunch of lands, have them all be untapped, and then do a crazy amount of loops. It's an Underworld Breach deck. It's an Ad Nauseam deck with 38 lands. So definitely able to play a ton of advantage that way, which is pretty sick. It's doing Gifts Ungiven things for Underworld Breach, as I mentioned, Ad Nauseam, when like half of your deck literally costs 0. It's pretty easy to go for Ad Naus lines. Now, I know that there weren't all of these lines during the course of the tournament, but now there's Scapeshift lines where you're able to get piles of Scapeshift as long as your opponents have 4 lands. It's all relatively in the weeds and relatively complicated. I think what I'm going to probably end up doing is do a Wandering Minstrel deck tech relatively soon, because this deck, I think, I could spend another 30 minutes talking about all the intricacies of the combos of these decks. Like, it's something that I still have to double check and look up one more time. Definitely, being a contender for one of the more complicated decks in the format, but super cool to see multiple pilots not seeing that as a determining factor and saying, yeah, I'm still willing to try. The other main win cons are loops with Lumra or Aftermath Analyst, able to, sack those, get all the lands from the graveyard onto the battlefield, and then just like loop those over and over and over again. So a bunch of really cool stuff here from this cEDH 5-color Wandering Minstrel list. And as I said, definitely interested in breaking it down even further. It's also a deck I want to bring to a tournament sometime soon. And the only reason I've been hesitating, and I know there's a bunch of you who've commented on videos so far asking me to play it, literally the only reason I've hesitated is because these decks play so many weird random cards that I have to like actually go out and at the very least proxy or buy them before I take it to a tournament, because there's only so many tournaments that allow you to just like scribble on a piece of paper and say like, this is a card. So yeah, that's literally the only thing holding me back at this point. We have MVP 1221 here with Force of Will becomes a +1 with this Y'shtola list. So as I mentioned, Michael was undefeated with this Y'shtola list going into the top 4 and was cooking people all day with it. When we were talking in the top 16, I was like, hey, what have you been doing to like win the game? Because I not only have a client who's working on Y'shtola right now, but it's also a list of, I think, like Lua and I were brewing before Final Fantasy was even like more than just the 2 precon commanders. And one thing we were talking about a decent amount was the fact that Sarah Ascendant put in a ton of work as a win condition, just sticking that early, putting a lot of pressure on people's life totals, combined with things like Shieldred and Y'shtola's triggered ability. You're really draining your opponents for a considerable amount of life as the game progresses. You obviously have your Thassa's Oracle Demonic Consultation win conditions in the deck, and then you have Teferi with Displacer Kit in here. I don't think we've talked about that here today. So basically, as long as you have a mana rock that makes more mana or equal mana to how much it costs to play it, you can draw through your deck with that combo. Now, something you may notice is for those who play Vivi, you might notice some similarities because there's a bunch of curiosity effects in this deck list. And what often is the case is the fact that Y'shtola, specifically, most Esper decks say lose life, but Y'shtola says Whenever you cast a non-creature spell with mana value 3 or greater, Y'shtola deals 2 damage to each opponent and you gain 2 life, meaning if you put a Curiosity on Y'shtola, for every instant or sorcery that costs more than 3, or for every non-creature, that costs more than 3, you are dealing 3 to each opponent, meaning if there's a Curiosity on your commander, you're drawing 3 cards. And what's great about Y'shtola compared to something like Vivi is that you have the Esper color pie there to support the deck. So it does a lot of really crazy stuff. You still have access to your Esper Sentinels, your Mystics, your Ristics, all that kind of stuff. Delny is like so insane in this deck because not only does it double your Y'shtola triggers, but also, you know, your Fairy Masterminds, your Archivist of Agma, which does not actually seem to be in this deck, but your Tataru Tarus, right? Like all of your cards that fit under that shell also get doubled, which is pretty crazy. You also draw on Lavala there just to say like, all of you Thrasios decks, no thank you. You aren't doing any magic here today. Yeah, and then a bunch of interaction that costs more than 3 is kind of a thing you just fill the deck with. A lot of stuff that ends up being free. So you're free draining while also being responsible, interactive with the table. You're maintaining your card advantage. That's generally the way the deck works. There's also Helm of the Gas Lord, you got to shout out because it's like the craziest Y'shtola card, basically. If the creature is blue and black, it gets +2/+2, and whenever it deals whenever it deals damage, to a player, an opponent, draw a card, and whenever it deals damage to an opponent, discard a card, right? So for every instant and sorcery or every non-creature spell that costs more than 3, you're able to hit your opponents for 2, you gain 2 life, they discard a card, you draw a card. So yeah, Helm of the Gas Lord is really open to get blowing out, right? Like you have your 4-mana commander and you're putting a 4-mana aura on it, but if it sticks, like the odds of you losing that game are so low that like it's kind of worth the volatility. So pretty spicy stuff here. I'm so glad we actually get to cover Y'shtola here on the channel because it's a deck that I found really fascinating and it just hasn't come up yet. So cool stuff here from MVP 1221. Congrats on making the top 4. And then we have me. Hey, it's me, everybody. This is me, and I decided, you know, what helps when you're driving like 14 hours and getting like 2 hours of sleep is also switching decks between tournaments. So I decided to play Loot the Pathfinder. For those who've been paying attention to the channel since Aether Drift has been out, they all might know that I love this commander. I love this little guy. I think Loot is so cute and he's fun and I think he's silly and ended up being good enough to win the tournament. So do I think Loot is the best teamer option out there right now? No, not particularly. Do I think it's like absolutely fundamentally broken? No. Did I have a lot of fun with a really cool deck list? 3 billion trillion %. This deck was so fun to play. I would 100% do it again. Loot was really, really fun. And also, I love the little guy. Also, you can see a bunch of pictures of me with my very stupid meme playmat that I printed the night before at the King's Court because they have their own playmat printer, which was super sick. And I had a Loot deck box and I was like, oh, I gotta make the Loot playmat super memey as well. But yeah, Loot was super fun to play. What do you do with Loot? So there's a bunch of different combos. And for those who've been paying attention for a long time, like the ones I was playing when Loot first came out were like Deadeye Navigator and Lily Splash Mentor and Cradle stuff. And basically the week leading up to this tournament, I was like, this feels like bad Rograk Thrasios. And I don't want this deck to be bad Rograk Thrasios. So I decided to make it its own thing. And so it basically became this like mid-range list that was like very definitively teamer mid-range, with Loot being this really cool support piece, right? Loot can be the outlet for any of your infinite bounce combos, right? So Hullbreaker Horror combos. And then I believe I was also on Retraction Helix. You can tell how many times that came up from me saying I believe I was on it. This is another case like we talked about with Kefka, because Loot doesn't go infinite with the Retraction Helix Valley Floodcaller thing. But every time you play Loot, you can pay a blue to draw 3 cards. So my math was basically going like, I'm pretty sure that if I start going through my deck, 1 out of every 3 cards will be a non-creature spell. And I'm pretty sure the math supports that because we've got 21 creatures and 28 lands, so 49. So if you take 50 cards left in the deck list, it's literally half, a little more than half, right? And so the math was in favor of me being able to just like bounce and play Loot over and over again to draw 3 cards and be able to basically continue going infinite through the deck. It's a squee food chain list. For those who don't know, Loot's a little weird with food chain in the sense that it does go infinite with food chain as long as you have 1 extra green. The 1 extra green allows you to activate his top ability, which is exhaust, add 3 mana of any color. So you exile squee infinitely, you make infinite mana of every color for creatures, right? So you have infinite mana of every color for creatures. Then you cast loot, and you activate with that 1 extra green its ability to add 3 mana of any color, which you add 3 green because you're going to end up needing that for filtering. Then you exile your loot, you put him back in the command zone. You use some of the infinite creature mana, play him again. Now you have 3 mana to go for every color. So you repeat that over and over again until you have infinite green mana. When you have infinite green mana, you repeat that over and over again until you have infinite mana of every color, right? Then you once again cast loot out of the command zone, and you use his bottom ability, the red. Loot deals 3 damage to any target. So you lightning bolt a player, exile it to food chain, play it again, lightning bolt a player, etc., and then they die. So loot is a food chain commander, just a little bit of a weird one. Obviously, the same thing would happen if you Hullbreaker Horror him. If you bounce, make infinite mana, replay loot over and over again, lightning bolt your opponent. So for those who can see, it has the exhaust ability, and the way exhaust works is you only are allowed to activate the exhaust abilities once. But if you make a new loot by either copying it, cloning it, sending it to the command zone, exiling it to food chain, bouncing it back to your hand, the next time you play a loot, it is a legally distinct different loot. And it having haste is the reason you can do any of this stuff. This deck was so much fun. I also was kind of like humming and hawing about the fact that like the combos felt super clunky in the course of the game. And so I made this really heavy into a Breach deck. As I mentioned, I was able to win the finals by doing Shifting Woodlands Underworld Breach stuff, which I thought was super fun and cool. Definitely was like a line I want to mess around with more going into the future, because Shifting Woodlands plus Underworld Breach is just feels like so broken. Shifting Woodlands is very, very powerful. And if you can get a Breach into your graveyard, it's suddenly, stifle this activated ability, or I have an uncounterable Breach on the battlefield, which, can still get blown up and bounced and like all that stuff. And then you lose your Woodlands. But like at the same time, a Breach that avoids the stack is pretty good. So there's Intuition helps out the Breach, Gifts Ungiven. Traditionally, obviously, you need like a Savine's Reclamation to do that kind of stuff. But in this deck, you specifically have Colossal Sky Turtle and Eternal Witness. So your Breach pile is you get Eternal Witness, Sky Turtle, and Underworld Breach, and then you pick it back up, and then you pick the Breach up from the graveyard, because they're never going to give you the Breach in that situation. They're going to give you one of the things that allows you to pick up the Breach. You play your Underworld Breach, you cast the Intuition or the Gifts Ungiven out of the graveyard, you grab your other pieces that you need. GG's, the game is over. It's way clunkier than the Savine's Reclamation line that you see often in like blue for Armand decks like that. But, at the end of the day, you're in Teamer, you make a lot of mana in general. It was acceptable. It worked. It worked enough that it was able to get me up to this winning position here in this cEDH tournament. So playing some fun stuff in the deck. Rumble was there to set up Breach lines. Stock Up, I'm just like happy with this card. I never feel bad resolving a Stock Up. I've had a lot of players being like, yeah, what is this Legacy? What is this Standard? Like, which is so fine. Like it is a bit of an expensive rate for that type of effect, right? It's the same cost as a Rhystic Study, and clearly it's not a Rhystic Study. But like, Stock Up was fine, I have no complaints about it. It like every single time it would get me like a land or a piece I needed for a combo. Like it just kind of was good every time I played it. Also, you might be noticing there's Twin Flame and there's Ghostly Flicker in this deck, because this also is a deck that goes infinite with Dualcaster Mage, which, okay, there we go. I was like, where is it? Dualcaster Mage. So if you have a Ghostly Flicker on the stack, you can have your Dualcaster enter, infinitely flicker your lands and something else. So if you have loot on the battlefield, you can infinitely flicker your lands to generate infinite mana, and then you transition from infinitely flickering your lands to infinitely flickering your loot, and your lightning bolt them every time the flicker resolves. Dualcaster Ghostly Flicker actually came up way more often than I thought it was gonna. It's a 6 mana combo, so it's super expensive and super clunky, but like at the end of the day, it did stuff. So like I can't complain too much because it was effective but expensive, and so the deck did what it needed to, right, in those moments. So it's definitely really interesting there. And then the rest of the deck's like trying to do like some of the mid-rangey, crunchy stuff that the format kind of is featuring right now, right? So a lot of Mystic, Rhystic, Sylvan Library, doing a lot of card draw stuff. I'm on One Ring. I'm on tried out Commandeer for the first time. I've been kind of a Commandeer hater, and it's been okay. Like it didn't come up in like a lot of games where I like stole a One Ring or a Necropotence or something like that. But I stole a Silence in the finals, which was pretty effective. And then there was another spell I stole in the Swiss that I was like, oh, that was a pretty good job, Commandeer. Like you got the job done. At the end of the day, it's like, it's very card intensive, but like a lot of my mulligan plan was to go get card draw or, just use loot for the Ancestral Recall mode on him. Right. And so like, it was okay, you know. I don't have a lot of complaints about Commandeer. I don't have a lot of things where I'm like, oh my god, it's the best card ever, right? Like it got the job done, and so like I'll probably keep testing it and stuff that like plays into this type of pattern where you're like going in, diving in, doing a little crunchy card advantage stuff. Like this deck was very much not like Teamer creature combo, which I think a lot of Teamer tends to be. This is much more like Teamer card advantage, mid-range, breach, I think ended up being a lot more of it. And it was like nice because if I was doing card advantage, mid-range, breach stuff, that plan felt very succinct and probably one of the faster plans in the deck, but also having a bunch of A plus Bs like Squee, Food Chain, and Dualcaster, Ghostly Flicker, Dualcaster, Blur, Dualcaster, Twin Flame. It all kind of had some layering and some synergy and stuff like that. There were definitely games where I'm like, yeah, this definitely, you know, has times where you're playing against things like Blue Farm and stuff like that, where I was like, listen, the deck is not as like clearly optimized as decks like that, but I mean, still was able to hang with all of those decks and was able to get me a win. So had a lot of fun with Loot. I think if anyone's interested in trying it, this deck was really fun to play. You know, I'm not going to say like you're going to go out and crush every single tournament you play with Loot, but very, very happy with how it played out. And honestly, I think it performed obviously better than I was generally expecting for sure. And obviously definitely better than I was expecting on 90 minutes of sleep. So super happy with this deck list. Very happy with the performance and super happy to go out to the New Jersey cEDH events. The crew that runs them is awesome. The New Jersey crew has been super cool, and a lot of folks in the East Coast, whether they're New York, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, like myself, have been showing up to do a lot of these Philly events, New Jersey events, New York events, and it's really cool to have a very vibrant scene here on the East Coast and to see tournament organizers who are really willing to go above and beyond for their community, throw events like this, as often as they can. So there's also going to be a link down in the description below for the NewJerseyCEDH.com. Go check it out if you're interested in checking out any of these events that are local and nearby. They're starting up with some low stakes events for the next couple of weeks, months, etc. But then, looking to do more big projects into next year. And then, talks, maybe they're going to try and get a Jersey East Coast invitational circuit thing going on, which is really, really cool. So excited to see where that ends up going. But thank you all for watching this week's video, and I'll catch you next time. Peace.